And how was your experience of sampling, Mel, with the first day?
Um, it was interesting. I went for a walk around Central Park with a friend beforehand, and so I was like telling her about it, and I was like, it was hotly anticipated. I was like, yep, I'm gonna like do that this afternoon. So I was like excited, and then I was quite startled when the first beep went off. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's
Mhm.
happened. um, and then I was trying to make myself just go about my day and ignore what I was doing, like as in, like you said last time, Russ, like
Mhm.
the idea is to not be consciously aware that you're doing sampling. So I was like trying to do that. And I feel like I settled into that a bit more like after maybe 3 beeps, then like I kind of was chill
Mhm.
about it. But I think when you first start, you're kind of like and like waiting for them a little bit. But
Mhm.
then like that kind of normalized. Um, and yeah, like I went out and about with it in, and so it was like doing jobs and stuff. Like I was trying to like live my day rather than change what I was doing because I was doing this, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Sounds like you went about it right.
Okay.
Um,
Um,
should
yeah.
we?
Sorry, did you
And
want to
and
share?
I would add to that what you reported was pretty much standard procedure. Should start by the first beep.
Mhm.
Sort of hard to get rid of the beeper for the first couple of beeps, and then sort of fading away. That
That's cool.
pretty pretty vanilla response.
Thanks. So far, so average.
Right.
I, I said, so far, you're average.
So, Julian, we haven't decided what we're going to do. You want to do the first beep, and I'll do the second beep, and
Yeah, that sounds
back
good
and
to
forth
me.
like that.
Straightforward.
And I would say, Mel, we will alternate back and forth, and in within the questioning, if I have something to say, I'll talk to Julian, and if I'm questioning and he's got something to say, he can talk to me as well. And there's no rule about how we do this, other than we're trying to get at your experience, and we're also trying to give Julian a little feedback about what I think, and he can give me feedback about what he thinks,
Okay.
and you can give us both feedback about what you think. And
Mhm.
well,
Okay.
there's we don't have a choreographed plan here.
So I guess let's get into it. The first beep.
Okay.
So,
So,
what was in your experience, if anything, the
yeah.
time of the first beep?
So I like how you say if anything, because that was like, I struggled a little bit, I think, with a bit of a perfectionism complex here because, so this becomes a bit of a thread. But so first beep went off at 1:49 p.m. and I wrote down that in my head before that was grab the spray and wipe the kitchen down because I was in the process of cleaning and like that
Mhm.
was quite literally the next thing I was about to do. So like just before the beep went off, like I think I'd just watered the plants and I was truly just about to open the kitchen cupboard and grab the spray and wipe down the kitchen bench.
Mhm.
So like that's what was in my brain.
So you say, grab the spray. What was the full phrase that you just mentioned? Grab the spray and.
Grab the spray and wipe the kitchen down. But I wouldn't say it was articulated in like that direct phrase. Like it wasn't my voice telling me to do that. It was the idea of like that's like instinctively that's the thing I'm going to do next, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it wasn't those words, it wasn't a voice, but it was the idea.
And I
Um,
knew that that's what I was going to do and that was the thing I thought of
mhm.
and that's what was in my brain, but
Okay,
it wasn't a voice saying grab the spray and wipe down, like no, if that makes sense.
yes. As far as your ability to discern, because I mean, this is the first sample and it
Mm.
might be you had something different in your experience altogether. Um, but were there words at all to this or no?
I don't
So
think so.
can I back us up back us up a step here? Because I'm concerned that we have, she said that this was in her head, but I'm skeptical because that's just the way I
Yeah,
am.
I'm staying skeptical too. That's why I tried to say that it might have been another experience altogether. But I guess what I'm trying to do is see if we can get precision about this, and if there are signs that it might be inaccurate, to try to discern that from questioning.
So I think there's already signs. And
Yeah.
so what I would like us before we buy into the fact that there is some kind of a phrase, which was your word, I think, Julian, before we buy into that there was anything there about that other than this was just an act that was about to happen. I think that's the distinction that we have to make. So I would like to know whether this was whether at the moment of the beep there was basically I'm shifting my action from having, I forget what we were down there, having watered the plants to being about to wipe down the kitchen, or whether there is some thoughty kind of a thing that's there. So the question for me is this just a sequence of actions that if I had to say what was in my brain, what my brain must have been saying or must have been conveying or must have been phraseologying or something, well, I'm about to do that, or whether this is just my body is doing it. I've finished this task and now I'm about to do that task.
I think the latter is probably more accurate, but I have some hesitation based on this being the first beep. So I find it a little bit hard to differentiate that, but I think what you're describing is what I felt of like, that was the next thing I was going to do, and that's... So for me, it's kind of like, well, there was sort of nothing going on in here because I was doing that activity and I was about to do that activity. But that feels like it's not answering the question.
So that is a great description of why I think we have to go really slow about assuming that there's something going on mentally or whatever, which is what I think Julian's line of questioning ran the risk of. So I totally agree with what Mel said. It's the first day she doesn't know. What I don't want us to do on the first day, on the first beep, is to intimate to her, give her the impression that there has to have been something mentally going on there. Maybe there wasn't, maybe there wasn't. And that was what I was worried about, the line of questioning.
Understandably. Sometimes I try to, if there's something specific mentioned, I try to see if more detail can be gathered about it. And then after that, back up, say, oh, well, maybe the details aren't there. So maybe it was something else. But I agree.
I think that's a risky strategy.
Okay.
Because it runs the risk of, after having asked about it for a half a minute or a couple minutes or whatever, then it seems like it was mental.
So Mel, you're saying that it may just have been the action you're involved in, and then you attributed this thought component after the fact to this action.
Yeah, I think so, because I guess I was trying to prescribe something. So it was like, oh, the beep went off. What was in my head? Well, I consciously decided that I was about to do this thing. So I guess that's what had just filled my brain. Mm-hmm. But beyond that sort of decision to do that, I can't come up with any other description of what was going on.
And you mentioned a decision. That's something we could probe if there was a decision. That we could also hold the possibility that you were merely in the midst of an action and that later you call it a decision. The first beep, it's always, or the first day of sampling, you can try to get more detail, but the first day is never used for analysis. It's always training. So keep in mind for all of this that the point isn't, oh, we need to find out everything about this beep, because I don't think we will. But whatever we say, that's just to look out for that on subsequent days. So these are all things you could pay attention to more on the next days. So with that in mind, I think we can continue kind of probing this a little bit, but to be very wary that we might be making stuff up. Does that sound good to you, Russ, to keep going a bit on this deep and then see what we can get out of it?
Yeah. See how it goes.
See how it goes. All right. So so you mentioned kind of the decision to grab the spray. That's one word you used. And at another point, you used the word that it was a thought to grab the spray. So to the best of your ability to recollect now, how would you characterize this experience?
And I got to add to that list. And she also actually began with her actual first words about this description was, if I'm recalling, like something like, "I'm glad we have the nothing."
Yeah.
So you got to put nothing into that list.
Yeah, nothing.
Prominently into that list.
Yeah, that's important. That's also, that could be a possibility. So kind of out of those possibilities we mentioned, or any other possibility, how would you describe this experience?
So, yeah, I think thought is the wrong word to use because that sort of suggests there was too much consciousness about maybe like a decision-making process or something. Like I would say it was more instinctive than that. And so in that way, I lean towards this like nothingness, but this feels wish-washy to me, but in terms of trying to like describe it to you, but it was just quite instinctual, but like just before I do the action, I know I'm going to do the action, but it's not so much as like there's been a process in my head of like, oh, what should we do next? Should I pick up this and do that? So like, it's not that much run up, but before I grab the spray and wipe, I know I'm going to grab the spray and wipe.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Well, I don't think we'll ever get to 100% on this, but we can keep asking questions to give you an idea what to look out for. And you said that nothingness was wishy-washy, but I don't think it is. If nothing was in your experience, that's okay. We can say that. So you also mentioned a kind of knowing you were about to grab it. And previously you mentioned a decision to grab it. So these are different things. And any of them could be true or none of them. So with that in mind, how would you characterize it?
Knowing, 100%, not decision, knowing.
So more about the knowing. So not like a decision, a conscious decision, I will do this. So more about knowing that. And how would you describe that knowing?
The word I always keep coming back to is instinctual. Like it's almost actually another word that comes to mind is kind of like autonomous. Wait, is that right? Or maybe it's the opposite to that. But in terms of like, like autopilot, actually, that's sort of the word I want. Like, so it's a knowing that I'm going to do this and then that is the doing, and my brain is sort of like relaxed into that autopilot mode. There's no, like decision-making process on that occasion. Is that making any sense?
So you use these, you say autonomous, autopilot, and instinctual. Yeah, I think this goes back to what Russ was saying, that it might be, to not ignore the nothingness part of it. So those words also make it sound like it could just be an automatic process potentially.
Automatic is the word I would use.
Yeah. Would you say, to the best of your ability, would you say you're conscious of it at all, or no?
How do you mean?
Are you? Is it possible that it wasn't in your experience, that it was just something you were doing, but
that I was just doing? Yeah, I mean, if you go down that line, then yeah, I was doing the stuff I was doing, and my brain wasn't doing anything else beyond being present to do the thing we were doing. Like maybe in that sort of way, like my brain was like the same space and time that my body, like I wasn't drifted off. I wasn't like thinking about anything more than just doing the action that I was doing.
Okay. So I think I would leave this questioning there. I wouldn't try to probe too much more. On other days, there may be more to probe, if we could get into things like how this appears to you. But for now, I think we started off on a different track, which was you phrased it more as a thought, grab the spray and wipe the kitchen down. And then we transitioned to seeing that it might not have been that at all. It might have been something more instinctual and automatic. So on future days, to keep that in mind, to really be precise about how you describe things. And you don't have to formulate them in a way that you think will be useful to us or not wishy-washy. Like if you didn't experience something at all, you can say that. If it was autopilot and barely there, you can say that. Russ, would you have any other things to ask about the speak?
No, I think leaving the speak is good. I'm in favor of that. I wouldn't have given the kind of instructions that you just gave, because I think it's sort of counterproductive to give any kind of instruction. To the extent that she listens to you and tries to do what it is that you asked her to do, then she's no longer just trying to get at her experience her way. She's trying to get at her experience Julian's way.
Okay.
And so instead of doing that, what I would have said was something like, you're doing a great job here. This is a very difficult task. We're not, particularly on the first beep on the first day, we're not committing ourselves to anything. We've given a shot at it. You're doing great. We're doing great. I would have said something like that rather than, and it seems to, so now I can switch gears. It seems to me that you and I sometime, Julian, and maybe today, we're going to have a conversation about the importance or lack thereof of words, because DES really has nothing to do with what she says. So I don't want her to try to be precise about what she says. What I want her, because that makes it about the words, and DES is not at all about the words. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation that will unfold for Julian and me. My guess is over some number of weeks, but it's not about the precision of the words. It's about whether she's conveying about experience. Has almost nothing to do with the words.
That's interesting. I guess I'll see more of what you mean. I wouldn't disagree that the phrasings aren't important. What's important is conveying it.
That's correct.
I guess our reach to how it's conveyed is a lot of the time through words, but also expressions and all that. So I'll keep that in mind as we go.
What I think I would say in this draft of the conversation would be something like, to make it about Mel's words is to put the responsibility onto Mel, which is not where I think it belongs. This is a first-person plural game. It's about Julian's reception of her words as much or more as about her production of the words. And so I would, to my antennae on the questioning that you just did, you were trying to convey You were trying to clarify her meaning of words, which is not the deal.
Oh, I see what you mean about that. I don't know if I always do that. I guess my intention was to not use my own words, to stick to, or to maybe not. Yes, I think I stressed words too heavily. The intention was you've conveyed this in different ways that could mean different things. You conveyed it in a way that could mean you made a decision about something, or a way where it was more automatic, and to try to reconcile those different descriptions. But yes, I don't want to lean on the idea you have to use the right words. I think as Russ says, that's important.
So shall I ask about beep number 2?
Yeah.
Beep number 2, what was in your experience?
If
anything.
So it was at 2:14 p.m. and I was vacuuming my house and all I wrote down was I was vacuuming and I was just completely consumed by that action. Like there was nothing of note in my brain.
Nothing in your brain at all? I'm just mindlessly vacuuming?
Mindlessly vacuuming.
And attending to any particular aspect of the vacuuming? The bodily feeling of it, the seeing of it, the carpet of it, the floor of it, the sound of it?
I noted, and I note these later too, I noted that like I felt, like a relaxation and a contentment and things like that. But I wasn't noticing any like I wouldn't say I had noticed the sound so much or the particular part of the floor or any, like I was just like the phrase sort of autopilot again feels relevant.
And the relaxation portion of it, is that something that you can look back after the beep and say, well, I was relaxed while I was doing that? Or is relaxation something which is before the footlights of your consciousness at the moment?
I think maybe both parts is true, if that makes any sense. Like I did note that like I was having a lovely, what day was this? Monday, but I was having a real sort of Sunday vibe. So I was very like, I was in a really lovely mood yesterday and I didn't really have anywhere to particularly be. And so I was in quite a relaxed mood generally for my day.
Okay.
And I think that that's reflected in each of the beeps that my inner experience each time seems to be like pretty consumed in the action that I was doing. And I think that's directly relevant to the overall state of being I was in for the whole day.
So what makes life difficult and makes our conversation difficult, and not uniquely your conversation, but I would say in general the DES conversations is whether that state of relaxation is a context thing, and out of that state of context, out of that state of relaxation comes this relaxed vacuuming, or whether the recognition of the noticing of the relaxation is actually present at the moment of the beep.
I find that really hard to articulate in terms of like, so this one in particular, right? Like that's all I wrote down. Like I was like, oh my God, the beep's gone off and I was just vacuuming and I didn't notice anything else. So in that sense, I felt like annoyed from a perfectionist standpoint, but of like, I want to have words to put down on a page, but nothing nothing was particularly obvious to jot down.
So that's great as far as I'm concerned. If there's nothing going on, there's nothing going on other than vacuuming. I'm just vacuuming. That's it. If that's it, that's fine with me. And I'm not looking for anything that is beyond that, if there is nothing beyond that.
Yeah. For this one, that was definitely the case. Like that's all I wrote. I was like, there was nothing else to note.
Okay. I'm happy with that. Julian, you got questions about that?
So just vacuuming. Yeah, I don't know if we can get 100% detail, but when you say you were just vacuuming, were you still experiencing this vacuuming, would you say?
Experiencing how?
Well, possibly you were vacuuming and it wasn't so present in your awareness, but it was still in there. It was still part of what you were experiencing. Or potentially your mind was completely blank and nothing was in your experience.
Good question. No, I think I was present in the action. I don't think my mind was like so completely blank that I wasn't like, yeah, that's a tricky distinction though, because it feels like a pretty unconscious sort of act and presence.
Yeah.
You know.
And Russ before kind of asked there was a bodily component, there was sound of it or something like that. And yeah, I wanted to have like a little extra beep discussion of that because that is kind of introducing new ideas that could bias you. But I don't think they will. But so you wouldn't say any of that was particularly present at this moment?
The sound or like the physicality and things of what I was doing?
Yeah.
No. Truly the overwhelming feeling, which this feels frustrating to me, but maybe it's good for you, but because this becomes a bit of a theme, but like there wasn't anything notable to note. And I like racked my brain and I understand what I need to do.
Yeah.
But it was like I was just vacuuming and I was just there. I didn't necessarily notice anything. My mind wasn't drifting to something. I was just doing the thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy with that beep. I don't think I found anything new. But Russ, a question to you about, so when you ask questions that might give other examples, like were you noticing the sound, the smell, the sight? I guess it's not technically content neutral because you are introducing other things for them to think about. What's your approach to doing it? I mean, I do that too when I do DES because I find it can give examples, and the key would just not to stress anything too much, just to kind of give things as possibilities.
So I think it is risky to do it because if I had said, well, is it something, are you hearing something? And she had come back and said, yes, well, I was paying attention to the sound of the vacuum cleaner. Then I probably wouldn't have believed that report because I would have primed it and I made it a multiple choice test and she picked A. Then that to me is the lowest kind of evidence or pretty close to zero kind of evidence in favor of that. I did it, I think, because I wanted to open the window on sort of that there was nothing going on in experience. And I wanted to look sort of around the edges of that description and see whether by nothing she really meant sort of nothing in experience or whether she was, there's a lot of people in DES who have a hard time talking about sensory kinds of things. And so I was giving her the option of doing that. If we went back and looked at the recording of what I said, hopefully I would have said that in a way that was not invested in it. Hopefully I would have said, well, was there seeing or hearing or seeing a carpet or smelling it or whatever? And by saying it in that sort of sardonic or I don't know exactly what tone, how you would describe that tone, but uncaring kind of a way, I would have given her the option of talking about that, but without suggesting that I thought that was there. That would have been the...
Yeah, that was the tone that I got from it, that you mentioned on day 0, this kind of, you can give opportunities, but don't stress them. Like don't stress anything too much.
That's That's what I would guess I was trying to convey by that. And so I think it's risky to introduce things, and I think it's risky not to introduce things. That's the dilemma. And and so what I would be trying to convey to Mel on the first day is, I'm interested. I'm wading into your waters. You're saying there's nothing. This is what I'm conveying to Mel. You're perfectionistic about it, you say, and you're a little worried that maybe you're not doing the right thing. And I'm going to be trying to convey that I'm hearing you. You're saying that this is difficult. I understand that it is difficult, and the distinction for you that's difficult is between doing nothing and experiencing something. And even in what I'm saying right now, I hear myself saying that in a way that is not technical. I'm trying to hold Mel's hand, I guess you would say, as we step into waters where we can't see the bottom of the ocean, and yet indicate that I've heard what she said. It's and I guess particularly that I want to indicate to Mel that I want to hear it Mel's way, rather than I have categories it has to fit in. It has to be either this or it has to be that. It has to be this other thing. I don't want to say that to her.
All right.
I guess. Can I just add on that? Like, I find that really helpful, and I think that it probably says a lot about my personality, but because I am conscious of, like, there is this part of me that I feel like I'm not, and I know it's day one as well, but like that I'm not doing this well, or I'm not describing things right, or not on the right track. And I know that, like, none of that is even, like, there is no right or wrong, and like you could do a deep dive into what this says about my personality, but that is a thing that I'm feeling, of like wanting to like do a good job.
So I think that's actually generally true. I think most samplers want to do a good job. They do. Wanting to do a good job is different for each one. You do it your particular perfectionist way, and somebody else does it their particular perfectionist way, or whatever. Most everybody wants to do a good job and don't know what a good job is.
It's a weird thing to struggle with.
It is. It is, which doubles back to what I was saying about the first beep when I was saying to Julian that I wouldn't have told her how to do it, because that has implicit in it, well, you're not doing a good job, and everything that we do, I think in a way is you're not doing a good job, because we're going to try to get better at that. That implied in that is you're not doing a good job, but the difference is that we're not doing a good job. We haven't yet gotten it. We're gonna figure this out. Mel and Russ, and Mel and Julian, and Mel and Russ and Julian. We're gonna try to figure this out.
Yeah.
And if we can get that across on the first day, to the extent that we can get that across on the first day, we will have accomplished something.
Yeah, I'm trying to be authentic, and that's just like, I need to just be okay with that. And like there's like a pressure thing that's totally eternal. It's not like based on anything you've said, but like that is a thing that I'm feeling and trying to do this, of like putting pressure on myself to like perfectly articulate my experience, I guess.
But everything that you seem to be a bit nervous about, like, oh, I can't just write that. Oh, if I'm doing nothing, I can't just say that.
Yeah.
As far as DS goes, that's all fine. It's all well and good.
Okay.
And nothing to be worried about. Should we go to beep 3?
Yep.
Yeah, beep 3 is the most wishy-washy, to use that again, of them all, I would say. So it went off at 2:40 p.m. and I was sitting on the couch having a cup of tea, and I was like, the I've written, I was in a state of content, I was relaxed and I was present, and there honestly wasn't really a thought or overwhelming feeling beyond this state of contentment.
Mm-hmm. And was this state of contentment more something overall during this period, or was it also present right before the beep as well?
No, I think right before the beep as well, like I felt definitely like in that exact moment, I felt that.
Okay. And so let's dive into that, still holding in mind that it's possible that, you know, it might not have been there.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that it was. But so this state of contentment, how would you describe that?
A lightness, a almost unconsciousness, but a positiveness to it too. Like it just, but these sort of descriptions come to mind in terms of state of being rather than anything like particularly you know, easy to label beyond like feelings.
So nothing easy to label. Do you know if there was a felt bodily component or not, or you're not sure?
I don't think so. Beyond the sort of like maybe lightness that I could describe, but otherwise like no.
Yeah. So about the lightness, would you say that's using that metaphorically or no? You're not sure?
Like, I mean, predominantly yes. But yeah, I just felt, when I reflected on before the beep went off, what was going through my brain, like truly not much. I just felt good, I guess.
This good contentment feeling.
Yeah. At ease.
This at ease, peaceful, light, content.
Yeah.
So I'm still worried about this in the same way I think I was worried about in the first two beeps as well. Is what you're trying to describe that I was content and light and at ease and that was the way I was at that moment? Or are you trying to say I felt that this was somehow thematically or frontally or in the footlights of my consciousness or whatever that the And I don't know is a perfectly good answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't know. If anything, I probably lean towards the earlier one of like, yeah, perhaps I'm reaching too much and trying to find descriptions too hard, and in reality, like, again, it was easier to describe as like kind of a nothingness. But then I'm leaning into like my mood, you know, because I'm reaching for words. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. So the possibility that this contentment was maybe your ongoing kind of mood at this time, but in the exact moment before the beep, it might have been present, like experienced to this degree.
Yeah, it definitely was experienced at that point. Like that is certainly something that I was like, I don't want to use the word aware because again, that feels too like, the whole thing feels too conscious. Like maybe this is getting a little bit too sort of prescriptive again, but like, you know, when people sort of articulate like a flow state, I would say like that is sort of a relevant term to my experience at that time, and a little bit for like the vacuuming one as well, of like I was just sort of in this light nothingness that my brain felt at ease and I felt nice and whatever, but there's no audio, there's no visual, there's no whatever, like I was present and felt that. I don't know.
And you're unsure of any bodily sensation?
No, I didn't really particularly note any.
You didn't note any? But I guess still the possibility, so light nothingness could be kind of different from like feeling content. Do you think it was the peaceful and being content as like something was there, or just kind of the absence of anything negative?
I think I lean more towards absence.
Okay.
But in the sense that, the opposite is not true. So I guess, it's maybe like absence of stuff, but I note that it's like it feels positive and stuff because it wasn't the opposite to that, if that sort of makes any sense. But maybe that's getting a little off track.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned at first some context, you're having tea on your couch, I think. Was any of that experienced at all, or no, or you're not sure?
No, I don't think so. Like I was present in that moment and doing that, but I wasn't in my brain being like, I'm having a cup of tea, or like, oh, I'm enjoying the taste of this tea or something like that. Absolutely not. The beep went off and I was like, here I am. Like there wasn't, no.
Okay,
I'm done with my questioning. Russ?
So I think that was good. So when excuse me, what I would say, and I would say this if this were just Mel and me or whatever, I would say that the aim of our first conversations, or all of our conversations, is really as much or more aimed at next week than as at today. And so we're having difficulty here, which is good, and we're working at it, which is good, and it's frustrating, which is good, and maybe out of this pondering or however you want to describe this, maybe on some subsequent day we'll get better at describing some of the details, and maybe we won't. We don't really know the answer to that. But I'm happy as a clam as to what we're doing here. We are working at trying to be honest with each other about what the experience is.
And thanks, Russ, for getting back to the other possibility, because I did try to ask about it, if maybe this was context or was it directly felt. And Mel, you said it was directly felt. Mm-hmm. And then later, so I kind of had some skepticism in my mind, but I didn't know how to kind of probe again. Mm-hmm. So Russ kind of probed again and got that we might have been kind of making something too concrete when it wasn't, like the satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
So from that articulates what I would say is for Mel, the importance of the first day, or for Mel and Julian, or for Mel and Julian and Russ, for us, the important thing for the first day is let's try not to over-articulate. Mm-hmm. We'll try not to under-articulate either, but it looks to me like we have more of a risk of over-articulating than we do of under-articulating, so I'm probably going to be coming down on the left-hand side of that. And because every word that we use, every word that Mel uses, we don't know what she means. And every word that we use, Mel doesn't know what we mean. Mm-hmm. And so when we try to articulate the difference between context and actual experience, well, I know what I mean if I were to say that, but I'm pretty sure Mel doesn't know what I mean when I say that. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be we have to recognize that all these word stuff they're just sort of rubbery concepts that sooner or later we're going to, like silly putty or whatever, we're going to let those words eventually get to mean something for us. But on the first day, well, they're pretty amorphous.
Yeah. Want me to go to the next one?
Yep, number 4.
I was reading a book. So this went off at 3:08 p.m. and I was reading about creativity and was just sort of reading that concept, and I'd actually stopped on that paragraph and I'd read it a few times, and that's when the beep went off, when I was in the moment of sort of letting that sink in. That's what I was doing.
And is there anything experiential about that, or is this a...
No, not particularly. Like, I was just trying to, so I find I have a pretty bad memory, so I highlight books when I read, and if something like goes, oh, like that to me when I read something, I'll often reread it. And yeah, in terms of like the experience of reading, I suppose maybe I find that I have to read it a couple of times to try and make it sink in, because when I read, it's not audible. Like if I'm reading that sentence, I'm not hearing that, or when I go back over it, it's I really don't want to over articulate things as well here, Russ, so like pull me up if you think I'm being an idiot, but like it's kind of conceptual, you know what I mean? So I read this cool phrase and I read that and I was like, oh, that feels nice, and I just my eyes go over it again, and I'm brushing through that again, but I then find that very hard to retain. So that's sort of what I was going through in terms of the exact experience that was happening. I'm trying to soak in what I'm reading, and how does that soaking in process go in my brain? It's like almost like a light, like it's sort of there and then it's not once I've moved on to the next thing.
So the way that sounded to me was a description of your sort of reading in general. This is what reading is like for me. Mm-hmm. And I would like to encourage us to stay as close as we can to what was happening at the moment of this particular beep, whether that was typical or atypical of reading in general.
Well,
So what is going on at this particular moment, if anything?
Well, like I was conscious of the words that I was reading, definitely.
Which words?
The words on the page.
And what were those words?
I knew you were going to ask that. I don't have the book on me. But it was some sort of concept about creativity, like, you know, we are the root of our creativity, like blah, 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 something.
So if what I would like to know is if the words were, you said that you were conscious of the words, or the words were present to me, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Were there particular words, whether or not we can remember what those were now, but whether there were there particular words, and if so, were there one word or 2 words or 10 words or the whole page worth of words? Or?
I don't think I could say that there were particular words. Like, I know I was reading the thing, but like I remember like when the beep went off, it's like it caught me in the middle of a concept rather than like particular words that I could identify, if that makes any sense.
And can you identify the concept?
Well, I know all I can identify is that it was about creativity, and whatever it was, like I've forgotten what it was already, but at the time it struck me, and so I was like mulling that over, but I can't remember specifics about that. But that's what I was caught in at the time, of like going back over it because I thought it was interesting, but it was like, that's an idea. I know.
So we have to figure out what we mean by this, and that's what makes this work difficult, and it also makes it exquisitely interesting from my point of view, because it seems to me that, Mel, you're trying to tell us what's going on in your experience, and that's not an easy thing to do, and we're trying to hear it, and that's not an easy thing to do either, and yet we're all of us trying to do that, which is cool, and we haven't yet figured out how to do it, which is okay or perfect as far as I'm concerned, because that's what I think we're trying to do. So is there a going back experience of this, or is it more I'm taking the time to absorb this particular passage in the real world, or the actual words on the page world? It's about creativity, and I'm understanding something about creativity, and I'm in the process of trying to absorb or whatever something about that, and that's all that can be said.
Yep, I think absorb is a good word. I like that, because that feels like a good description of what was happening, of like trying to absorb it, but any more like defined than that, I don't think is a fair assessment. But I was definitely like presently trying to absorb that.
So there are words involved, but not a particular word. I couldn't say that I was focused on the phrase that said, creativity is measured by, or whatever. I don't know what the reading was, but
I don't think so. I think it was more like trying to absorb an idea more so than any specific words. So like, say I just read the sentence, and then I was like rereading it, but not like when the beat went off, it wasn't like, oh, I was stuck on the word rooted in creativity, and so I was thinking consciously, I was thinking of like those particular words. Definitely wasn't that. It was just like, oh, you caught me in the midst of absorbing this concept.
And so does that make this sort of like vacuuming? I'm vacuuming. I'm happily vacuuming. I'm not thinking about the vacuuming. If I vacuum and it turns out that there's a piece of lint that I missed, then I would go back and re-vacuum that kind of a thing. But I wouldn't think to myself, aha, there's a piece of lint. I would be skillfully going back or whatever to pick up what I didn't get on the first pass. And now I'm doing that, sort of the same kind of thing with the reading. I'm reading, and if I see a piece of lint in the reading that I didn't see, then I would go back.
Yep, I would notice, and I'd do, and then I rectify that, or I notice and I re-notice, but not so deliberately. But yes.
And so is there any difference in experiential difference between reading and vacuuming in this case?
Not overwhelmingly. No, they both feel relatively autopilot. I mean, I would say the only sort of difference perhaps is that when I was reading, I was attempting to absorb concepts. That was definitely a thing that was happening. Whereas with the vacuuming, there's no concept. I am just doing the physical action.
So the fact of the matter is that when I'm reading, I'm trying to absorb the contents, and when I'm vacuuming, I'm trying to clean the carpet. And those are both sort of the contexts of the effort, I guess I would say. That's just, when I read, I'm trying to learn something. When I vacuum, I'm trying to clean something.
Yeah.
Does that change my experience about it, or is it?
No, not. It feels slightly more that there's maybe a little more awareness in the reading as opposed to the vacuuming.
And what do you mean by awareness?
Like when we go back to like me absorbing what I'm reading, I'm I'm thinking about what I'm reading, and I know using the word thinking doesn't help us, but like I'm going over words in a page. Like you use like the lint analogy of like something of interest, absorbing that and continuing, as opposed to when I'm vacuuming, I might notice lint and go back over it, but that's not resonating as deeply as perhaps when something while I'm reading does.
So I'm happy with that beep. And my role as timekeeper is that we're coming up on an hour. You have anything more that you want to say about that, Julian?
I would ask a bit more with the knowledge that it might lead us into the weeds and get a bit off track, but I would still like to, because you mentioned this thing about creativity, and you're letting it soak in, or maybe you're not, and the whole thing is just more automatic. Mm-hmm. But assuming there's this aspect of trying to understand, would we know more about your experience by knowing the exact content of this thing about creativity, or would that not tell us anything?
I don't know if that was a question for me or Russ, but
that was for you. Yeah, for you.
I don't think so, because I think that the same experience happens no matter what I'm reading. If I was reading the New York Times and same thing, something struck me, I would go back over it and mull that over in the same way, or try and absorb the information in the same way. I don't think it's necessarily relevant because I was reading about more of a sort of fluid concept.
So this mulling or absorbing, mm-hmm. There's no difference to it whether it's the New York Times or you're reading Harry Potter or you're reading this book in creativity?
I don't think so. I think it's just how I try and try and retain information.
Okay. And how would you characterize this mulling? If it's there, if it's present at all?
It's very difficult to articulate, actually, because it's not like I keep, sort of saying like it's conceptual, like it doesn't feel like something that's black and white or that's like really clear. Like it's almost kind of like a hazy sort of thing of like I read the words and there's certainly an idea of a concept that I'm trying to take in, but that is not like vivid.
Mm-hmm. This is more for context. You had mentioned mm-hmm. you had read and now you were rereading and mm-hmm. and letting it sink in. Were you in the process of reading, whether or not it was like you were experiencing it, their words, were you kind of reading it, or you kind of just like processing what you read, or do you not know?
I would say it's a combo of both, and probably why I tried to sort of explain how the process of reading is for me, because I like remember when the beep went off, like my eyes were halfway through scanning over like the sentence again. So mm-hmm. that certainly process was happening, but the way I absorb what I'm reading is not like hearing the words as I'm over them. It's more mm-hmm. that hazy conceptual thing that I'm saying of like, I know I'm going back over that, but in that way where it's not necessarily like each word articulated, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, but going back to what Russ said earlier about being careful about generalizing your mm-hmm. experience mm-hmm. of reading, like how you mm-hmm. normally do it, because mm-hmm. we're most interested in this moment mm-hmm. right here. And yeah, it is a challenging sample for I guess for me and you and all of us. I don't think my other questions would be productive. I don't know quite what to ask.
So let me give a sort of a general overview of the way you find out what's a good question is not by consulting Russ and having him tell you what's a good question or not, but it's by consulting what Mel says. And if you ask a question and Mel tells you about something in general, then the question that you asked was a bad question, sort of by definition. And if you ask a question and Mel looks, or as best you can do, is trying to access her experience, trying to look directly at her experience, then you've asked a good question. That's the heart of DES. It's really quite simple, but it's not easy to do in practice. So and now I'm going to compare your line of questioning to my line of questioning. Your line of questioning resulted in Mel telling you about reading the New York Times and a bunch of other kind of stuff, which is to say she was talking about reading in general, which means whatever your question was, it pushed her in the wrong direction because she ended up telling you about something in general. By contrast, my question was about were you vacuuming? Was this reading just like vacuuming? It caused her, it looked to me, to try to figure out what vacuuming was like and to try to figure out what reading was like, which is to say to look at those specific feelings, those particular moments or whatever. And so I would say by my definition that was a good question because it looked like Mel ended up pondering her experience of reading and her experience of vacuuming. And whether we found out anything useful about her experience, probably not. It's the first day of sampling. We're not. This is going to be a difficult process probably to try to tease these concepts apart. But I guess maybe that's all I want to say about that is the object is to help Mel talk about 4 moments of her experience and do whatever we have to do to get her to do that. And not talk about really, it's worse than that or better than that or whatever. It's to get her to confront for herself, to contact for herself, to be interested in for herself what her experience is like. And then sooner or later, she's going to be able to tell us about it. Maybe not. Maybe her experience doesn't translate easily into words. But the first part of it's got to be get her into contact with moments, the moments that the beep happen to identify.
For me, by the end, I don't think my questioning was productive, although I kind of wanted to probe because for me, like, I was wondering if this was another more automatic moment, because many times you mentioned, processing or letting the words soak or trying to understand. And I was trying to see if this, if it was experienced and how it was experienced. And to me, the question of, to me, you mentioning the New York Times and saying that it wouldn't be different, that was interesting to me, whether or not it's true, because maybe it could mean you weren't so focused on the content. That's something I was wondering about, like how much the content was in your experience or not. But yeah, I still have a lot of questions left about this sample, but maybe best to leave them.
I can go to the next one if you want. I feel like the last 3 are sort of in the same vein. So
we've done an hour. Normally DES is just 1 hour of sampling.
So you don't need the others.
Kind of preserve all of our, mental concentration. Okay. And the point is not to get to every beep, but to do the best we can in a third job with the beeps we can get to. What do you say, Russ?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And so we ask for 6 beeps because maybe we can talk about 6 beeps in an hour, but maybe we can't.
Okay.
The risk of going forwards is that then we start to feel the pressure of time or something, and that's probably not a good idea. And fatigue and whatever. This is hard. It's hard work. And beyond that, it's a good idea to let what we have done sort of sink in and then get transformed and rejected or amplified or whatever. And so that next time we can come back at it with having profited from the experience that we had this way in whatever way that means. And I don't think we need to or could possibly actually articulate what it means to have profited by it, but we've done what we can do. And in that, towards that end, I would give us one more admonishment, and that is that today we spent quite a bit of time trying to distinguish between nothing and something, or between context and moments, or whatever we did. And that was good. I'm happy we did that. But I wouldn't want us to think going forwards, well, that's the important deal. Well, this is the way Mel's experience is going to be, and I got to be, if I were Mel, thinking, well, I got to be more careful in trying to distinguish between something and nothing, or between context and whatever. That's, maybe the next round of beeps will be entirely different from these, in which case what we said today will be sort of irrelevant. Or maybe they'll be the same kind of a thing. But what I don't want us to do is to prejudge what they're going to be, and to go looking for the kinds of experiences that we had today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I normally would tell people kind of what you told me not to do. Like, this might be something to pay attention on other days. I don't know if I read that in your work.
I hate that.
It seems to me that I don't know where I got that from. But yeah, if they say, oh, I had words in my head, or I might ask, do you know what they were? And maybe they do, or maybe they don't. And then I say, that could be something you could look out for if they are, or if they aren't. So
yeah, that's backwards from what I would do. I would like us to forget entirely what we did today, and come back at it anew, but with the profit that we have gotten, whatever that profit is, but without presuming to know what that profit was.
And I also appreciate, because I mean, I read up a lot on the technique of the method and questions to ask, but there's a lot more in kind of soft skills around it, like I appreciate getting to know, because I did have one participant who was a bit nervous, and we couldn't quite get past that. She was kind of worried she wasn't doing the method right, and I would keep saying, no, it's okay, as long as you tell us what you are or aren't certain about, like, you're doing the method right. But it's good to see your approach, Russ, on how to.
So let me tell you how I do that. So what you just said, the reassurance of, yeah, you're doing a good or whatever, that I think is what psychologists are trained to do, and I think it's a mistake. And because I think it puts you into the judgmental role of, I know what you're supposed to do, and I'm telling you as the authority that it's okay what you're doing. Instead, what I would do, and what I did with Mel, I think earlier enough, we can rewind the tape and see, is to say, this is difficult. It's difficult for me, and it's difficult for you, and I'm with you. I'm with you there trying to figure it out, and maybe we're going to be able to do it, and maybe we're not. And the difference there is, it's not me judging Mel. It is recognizing that this is a first-person plural enterprise. Maybe the match between Mel and Russ isn't any good because she doesn't like me or whatever. That's not Mel's fault, and it's not my fault. It's the we-ness of it. Maybe it's going to work, and maybe it's not going to work. And so I don't feel myself in a position to judge Mel actually one way or the other, either that she's doing a good job or that she's doing a bad job. The question is whether we. So I think Mel's on her side of the chasm and I'm on my side of the chasm, and I can really only deal with what's on my side. But I want to be honest with Mel. I want to be candid with Mel. And that's about as far as I can go. And Mel's either going to learn to be candid with me, or we're going to reach across the chasm and see whether we can do something that both of us find satisfying or not. We'll find out about that.
Yeah, and I feel like I will get better at it in terms of being a little bit more not like natural with it, but I guess also kind of accepting of, I think like the thing that I struggled with on this round was that I was looking to be able to articulate stuff really well, when in actual fact, like a lot of my experience feels like nothing. And so I think I'll get better at trying to not reach for phrases that perhaps like aren't there because I want to like do a good job and articulate my experience as accurately as possible. Like I need to like not overthink it as well a little bit.
It's a challenging enterprise. There's no question about it.
Very interesting.
And I think it's a totally interesting exercise. I think the particular Mel, Julian, Russ kind of struggle is peculiar probably to Mel, Julian, and Russ. And if it were 3 different people or 2 different people or 1 different person in the mix, the struggle would be different. And that's just the way it is. But that's part of what makes it interesting. That we have to figure out what the struggle is and how to do it. And that's going to be different for all of us, each individually, as well as the collective. So can we do it again?
I mean, up to you.
Yeah. Well, I guess if it works for everyone, like still works for me to do this time next week, if you want to do that again.
That would be October 17th at 8:00.
At the same times as today. Does that work? Is that what you were
works for
thinking
me?
For like, another a week? Is that fine?
That's fine with me.
A week works for me. Before I usually did actually sequentially every day. What's kind of your standard operation, Russ?
I don't think I have a standard operation. To the extent that I have a modal operation, I would say it's once a week. Mm-hmm. But I would say I would prefer more often than once a week if it were really up to me. But I would, once a day sounds too heroic to me.
Too much. So, I mean, I'm also fine with bi-weekly, because kind of you're in it, you kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but I guess it's up to you, Mel, really.
Well, yeah, I could do this same time, but on Friday the 13th of October, if you'd prefer, this Friday.
That works for me too.
That does not work for me.
That's okay.
I could do Friday. If it were Friday, it would have to be later by a couple hours, probably.
Yeah, I could do. So, I could maybe do 2 hours later, and that's all though.
10:00 on Friday the 13th. I could probably do 10:00. That would be 10:00 my time, 1:00, and like 7:00 Julian's time, or we can just go for next Tuesday. The reason that the modal time on Tuesday works is that the modal time weekly works. It's that most people's schedule works out in a way that we can do it.
Yeah, it sounds like that might be easier.
Okay, let's try that and then see moving forward as well. But okay, if we do same time Tuesday then.
Okay, I'll send out the invites and the email and the recordings and all of that.
Okay.
Awesome. Do you have anything else to add that needed? You're just going to say no and just keep doing what you're doing and this is
keep on at it.
I think I've said everything that I would like to say about that.
Okay.
So I think I've been as transparent as I know how to be about it, and
And I agree.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll do it all again next week. Thank you for listening to my mutterings.
Well,
Yeah, thanks.
we appreciate it. It's a totally interesting thing. There is very little in the world, I think, that's more interesting than it. So.
I completely agree.
I also think it's fascinating, so I'm glad to be doing this.